Hey party people. This video is all about how I design a flower print. And hopefully you can watch this video and pick up some tips and tricks to apply to designing all kinds of prints because the process will be fairly similar. And I am going to be demonstrating on a fairly simple-ish print. And then, of course, you can get simpler and more complex as your needs may be, but, you know, yada, 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 right? If you are looking for more information on the product development process of print design, working with a mill, working with a printer, you know, that kind of thing, then I already have that video, and I will link it in the description box below. So on to the flower print. What am I doing on the screen now? I am looking through my favorite flower book, and I flashed the ISBN on the on camera earlier. I'll have that in the description box below. But I like looking through books, like focus books, subject focus books like this, more than Google search because I don't know the names of a lot of flowers, and so I don't have to know that information. I can look through a flower book and I could just gravitate towards the ones that look pretty to me, look like the mood I'm going for in that collection. Number two, I can scan in as high res as I want. You know how sometimes you're going through Google and you see these images and it's really cool, but it's like 100 pixels by 100 pixels and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this stamp, this tiny, right? And so, you know, in order to play with the image, you can have like a high res. A thing I like about this book in particular is it shows the flowers close up and it shows the flowers kind of from far away so that you can see how the flower grows on the bush or on the tree or from the ground, you know, however the plant grows. And so you can think about scale and composition, whether or not you want to show leaves, whether or not you want to show a lot of background, or you want the whole thing just tiled with flowers, and start thinking about that as you're thinking about flowers. Like, look at these petunias. They're like no background at all, right? So you could do something like that. You could do something where there's a lot of green. So get your, you know, creative juices flowing by being inspired by actual nature. Okay. And so I will go through a book like this, and then I will pick a flower that I think really meshes well with my collection theme and my colors and all that sort of thing, and then scan it into the computer and start playing around with it in Photoshop. I picked this rose, and I scanned it at 300 DPI, and I am going to erase the background. It's, you know, I know Robin taught y'all how to mask things and stuff, but that's really not what we're doing today. I just want the rose itself so I can start messing with it. So I'm just going to erase the background pretty sloppily. I don't care. It's just whatever. And now I'm going to make multiple copies of this rose. And I'm going to make multiple copies in different sizes. And I'm going to play around with the colors. I forget what the tool is called. It's a hue saturation. It's Command U on a Mac. And you can play around with the colors and the saturation a little bit. This is not really a Photoshop tutorial, so I'm not going to get into it too much, but you can play around with that. It doesn't really matter because this is not your final image. This is just a step in the process, a tool that you're creating. But, you know, if you wanted blue roses and it helps you to visualize it by making the roses blue, you can do that here. Once you have a million roses tiled on an 8.5 by 11 or A4 paper, I go ahead and print it out. So now I'm going to cut out all my flowers, and I'm going to pull some figure templates, croquis, and then tape some tracing paper onto them so I can kind of create some mock-ups of clothes. And if you are good at Photoshop and Illustrator and want to do that on the computer, be my guest. But I'm I'm going to show it this way so that it doesn't become a Photoshop or Illustrator tutorial, but just about the method. What I like to do is, this is not about sketching out the designs, but just kind of drawing out some rough ideas on silhouettes. Like if you're going to do a bunch of men's shirts, or if you're doing, if you're thinking, oh, maybe I'll do some boxy dresses. This is not about design details, but just kind of a loose idea of the silhouettes based on your mood and color so far. And then start putting out the flowers on top of your figures. Of course, you can do a million of these. I do sell my fashion figure templates on my Etsy store, zoehong.etsy.com. And all you have to do is print them up really big so you have some room to play with. And yeah, just start messing around and lay out some flowers. And maybe at this point you decide, oh, you know what? I want some leaves. And so you can either just draw a bunch of leaves or, scan and print out a bunch of leaves. Or maybe you're like, oh, I want roses and daisies. And so you can go get yourself some daisies and start playing around with them. And then, you can do something like, oh, you know what? I love the roses, but I also want something in the background, maybe like a subtle stripe or a polka dot, or, something in the background that's a little bit more, tone on tone, textural maybe, so that the flowers are still the focal point, but I want a little bit something in the background, whatever, and just play. Lay out more tracing paper, play some more. Draw another one, draw 30 of them. Have fun. Just so that you can kind of get an idea for how you're going to use the print. Because, it costs a lot of money to develop and print out a custom print, and you might as well just kind of play around with how you're going to use them before you make those decisions. Once you're happy with the design and the scale of your flowers on your garment, you need to figure out how that's going to scale out in real life. And I like to use a palm to palm ratio. So I figure out the size of the palm of my model's hand on the croquis and how big one of the roses is in relation to her palm in the design. And then I draw my own palm onto the paper and then draw a loose rose on top of that to scale, measure that, and then I'll know the actual size I need to make each rose. Once you have an idea for how you're going to compose your print, think about what style your final artwork is going to be. And a tip for trying to figure out the style is to play around with your Photoshop filters purely for inspiration. You're not going to actually take, the pixelated rose image and just copy and paste that onto fabric. You want to make something original and create something for yourself, but you can take the ideas, kind of just jog your brain about and see what interesting options there are. You can do like a cool, something that looks like a hand watercolor, or you can hand watercolor it and scan it in and manipulate it that way. There are a lot of things you can do. This is just one tip. Now is the time to draw your print in vector art on your computer. And printers prefer vector art. They request EPS files because with vector art, you can blow up and play with the scale of your print as much as you want without losing quality. And it's much easier to play with drawings like this in vector art. So I use Illustrator, I drew out a rose, and then you can start manipulating the drawing here too by playing with the thickness of the outline, the color of the outline, the color of the individual petals, and so forth. Just, play around. You can put gradients on petals, anything you want. Next, you're going to have to think about what repeat you want to use, like in which format you want your repeat. I'm going to go over a lot of the more common ones, but not every single one. That would be a very long video. Okay. First up is the block repeat, where you just take the design and literally just repeat it, same direction, same distance, horizontally and vertically. Next is your brick repeat. And so with that, you have a row of elements. And just like a brick wall, the row beneath it will be offset. And then the row beneath that will be offset and often in line with the first row. A half drop repeat is kind of like if you took the brick wall and put it on its side. So you have a column of elements, and then in the next row over, it's offset. And then again, the next row over that is offset again. A diamond layout is when you take your elements and you put them in a diamond pattern. And when I talk about elements, obviously I'm demonstrating with simple things like hearts and my flowers, but it doesn't have to be the case. You can have a very complicated element with tons of things. Like let's say you wanted to do like an art supplies print, and each element could be a cluster of scissors and pencils and markers and erasers and wadded up pieces of paper. And then you repeat that cluster of things. And like that one cluster would be one element. Next is the border layout. This is a little bit different, but let's say if this is a roll of fabric you would have a border along one or both selvages where the main fabric is one print or a solid, and the border trim is another pattern or a solid. Next, I want to talk about all over prints. And I put them in quotes because this is actually difficult to get done because printers they'll want to work with a repeating element instead of like, unless you're working with very small pieces of fabric. But you can create an all over effect where it doesn't look like the element is repeating by creating an element that is very big. So whether that is a giant rose or that cluster, like let's say the art supplies cluster, you drew a cluster of art supplies so big that you could only fit like 3/4 of a cluster on a shirt. And so you don't see the repeat, you just see the cluster, right? And so you can create that all over effect. Like this one I'm demoing on screen where one repeat is so massive that unless you are creating like a giant massive hoop skirt, you're really not gonna see the repeat in one garment. Turnover layouts are when you take your element and you can have a block repeat, but you turn the element over with every repeat. So like you see I'm doing with the roses, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. A tessellation or an interlocking print is when you have pieces that are interlocked together like a jigsaw puzzle, so you see no background. And this is not like having this is kind of different from having like a bunch of flowers overlapping each other and showing no background like the petunias, but like literally over interlocking shapes. Like a honeycomb is kind of a classic interlocking shape. And yeah, like the previous jigsaw puzzles, like let's pretend you did a jigsaw puzzle and every single shape was exactly the same. Okay, that's a tessellation. You can have tessellations where you have two pieces, right? If I had like a little circle in between all the honeycomb corners, something like that. Fall-on effect is most commonly seen on plaids, but I do see them elsewhere too. This is when you look at a plaid and you have stripes going in one direction, and then you have stripes going in the other direction. And you know where they intersect? The color is different. So when you have blues intersecting each other, you get this little square where the blue is the most intense. Of course, if you have, blue intersecting green, you get a blue-green. And if you have a blue intersecting a purple, you get a purpley blue, and so forth and so forth. But you have that weave effect, and you can mimic that in a print as well, where that intersecting section is a different color. When you are designing your prints, you have to think about the direction of the print, because it is very important in the product development process and how you lay out your pattern pieces in a marker. Okay. Do you remember any of my lectures where I talked about napped fabrics and how if you have something like faux fur, you have to make sure that all your patterns are going in one direction, so that on your jacket, all the fur hairs are going in the same direction? It's the same with prints. Okay. If you have a non-directional print like I'm just demoing right now, you can cut it in any direction. Let's pretend all these flowers are identical. And so you can cut it in any direction, and it doesn't matter. You don't need to have a special mark on your pattern saying it needs to be cut a particular way because of the fabric. When you have a one-way print where it looks distinct in only one direction, it looks very different when you start turning them in different directions, then you need to mark on your marker, all patterns must go this way because I want the flowers to be on top and the leaves to be on the bottom. Okay. If you want this like little flower with the stem and the leaves, but you don't want to deal with the one direction, then you have to redesign your print. So maybe you have a row going this way and a row going that way. So you can cut your marker and the pattern pieces can go either direction, and it's fine. I mean, it won't look the same like that. So if you have any bias pieces that you're thinking of, things that are cut in different directions, like yokes on shirts, cuffs on shirts, those are things to think about when you're designing the whole garment with the print in mind. With four-way prints, it's a little bit different from non-directional. Non-directional, everything is identical and it's, geometrically placed, so you can just spin it and it always looks the same. But four ways, you've developed the print so that you can cut it any which way. It has a distinct kind of four-way look. A lot of people confuse non-directional and four-way. It's fine. And so, yeah, I have the flowers with the leaves, and I have some going in every single direction. So no matter which direction you cut it, there's always going to be some flowers looking, quote unquote, right side up. And then there is a stripe repeat where you can take an element, let's take our heart today, and create a stripe of hearts, and then have a big empty space, and then create another identical stripe of hearts. And then your dot repeat is, it can be a block, a half drop, a brick, what have you. But the dot repeats are ones where each element is very small and spaced far apart. So it, from far away, just looks like dots. So back to my Illustrator file, that green square is 4 inches by 4 inches, which is the approximate real size that I had drawn out before. And I've played around with the colors in my row so that it's more intense colors in the middle that resembles a little bit more like a real rose. And then I wanted the freshness of the green backdrop without having actual leaves. So I made that green. And I wanted the outlines to not really stand out so much, so I made them the same green. And then I didn't want it to look like a geometric repeat, so I've decided to make one repeat a big cluster of roses. And it looks like I drew a ton, but I didn't. If you look carefully, I've only drawn two roses, the 3/4 angle and the head-on angle. And I changed the colors and the sizes and just like manipulated them a little bit, you know, kind of tweaked them a little bit, turned them around in different directions. So just at an off glance, it looks like a bunch of different roses, but it's just two. So this is one repeat. And I do prefer the green backdrop, so I'm going to make sure I extend that across. And then when I was doing the repeat, I made sure that it's like an approximate rectangle, but I made certain flowers like stick out off to the sides so that it doesn't look so like orderly when I start laying out my repeat. And now I'm going to play around with layering repeats. So maybe I want a stripe in here. So all I would have to do is draw some rectangles, add another color. And if I want something subtle, I'll just do another green. If I want something bold, maybe I'll do a white stripe, that sort of thing. And just play around, you know, horizontal, vertical, bias, and just mess around with another element in the background. If you want, you can do it and then decide the whole thing is super ugly. But here's the thing. I save everything. And that's why I have a bunch of hard drives, because I save everything. But yeah, like maybe you're undecided. Go ahead and save a separate file where you have a stripe in the background, where you have a polka dot in the background. It like takes nothing to save it and then maybe use the same concept at another point in time. And then once I have the final thing, you can play with repeats. You can play with colorways. You know, anytime you take the time to develop a print, I urge you to offer different colorways of the same print. And in this example, the different kinds of prints I have, the colorways, they're too close together for it to be viable. Like these are just 6 options for the same print. But once you have it all figured out, I urge you to have different colorways, like maybe do something that is more like white and pink roses, you know, a more cool color story, you know, depends on the rest of the color story of your collection, but offer your print in at least 2 colorways. And that's it. That's what I got for prints today. I hope you learned a lot. Please give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today. Share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, you know, all the ways you show me love. I have 163,000 subscribers right now. And when I think about it, I'm like, wow, that's just crazy. I appreciate everyone's support so much. I can't even tell you. Anyway, so yeah, this is my process. Of course, lots of different designers have lots of different ways they like to do things, but I try to like pare down and kind of streamline and make things, you know, as manageable step by step as possible so that y'all can practice. There's that P word again. Hashtag always be practicing. Hashtag practice not magic. And have fun. I really enjoy print design. I hope you will too. And I will see you in the next video.